name is Gayatri Vasudevan. I'm a co-founder of LabourNet. I started as a development professional in 1994, and then it's just been going deeper and deeper into issues which are related to work, labor, and gender. These are three areas in which I have continued to work through all the years. I had a strong calling to work in the development sector even while I was studying. So a lot of my work also precedes my starting in 1994. As I started off, my first experience was actually training panchayat, women in panchayat. In those days, the reservation had just come. So affirmative action had resulted in reservation of seats for women in panchayats. So they had to be actually awareness and training for them to participate in panchayats. So that's my first job in a sense. A lot of learning there because I come from a urban middle class, more privileged upbringing. So for me to understand, the best way to is a Hindi word, Seema, was very difficult. Women had so many boundaries which defined their lives. Permission to come to a meeting, permission to leave home, permission to participate, were all was something I had read about, but for the first time I really experienced it. To give you, if I can just take you to an example and see how far, in a sense, India has also come, and how much it took me to unlearn what I knew. My job, as I said, was a trainer. So I was supposed to go village to village and train women who had been recently elected to panchayats. That was the job. So the first meeting I attended was in a school compound, and because women had to come and it was a residential 2-day training program, I found that no one turned up. I was like literally there and there was nobody. When I went out to ask why isn't anybody there, they said they don't need to be trained. Men know how to operate in panchayats. They've been doing it. They'll just sit. So I said, no, my job is to train. So come for training. Then they thought, okay, I think I sort of spent a lot of time persuading people to come. Then I managed to get a few of the, I forget the number, but whatever number was supposed to come, 50% of them I managed to convince, saying you should come. And then at night, when I said it's residential, because a lot of the activities are also about bonding, and I hadn't designed the program. Someone else had designed and told me to do it. I was a young 23-year-old at that time. So the interesting one, I think, was they said, we can't stay the night. We came because you were really very persuasive. And, you've left your home and come as a young girl. So we have come. But I don't have to really, we can't stay the night. We have enough work to do. I said, no, now that you've come, it's residential, just stay on. You learn also, and plus we'll have fun together. And suddenly at night, I find the gates of the school are closed around 6:30, not even night. And all the men are sitting outside. So it's like just been locked up. I was thinking to myself, women did not have the freedom. And for the first time, it struck me what that means to empowerment, right? When you can't decide, should I go, should I not go? And if I go, I need to be secured. So what is security came to the forefront. So that was my first sort of understanding of the gender dynamics and what it meant for power. So it was, and several of these women were very articulate, very knowledgeable. It was not like they weren't. It was not like I had to teach them to do things. They taught me a lot because A, they were older, B, they were experienced, C, they knew what it is. I was textbook out, whereas they were practicing. So to me, the big learning was that execution and policy needs to come from where people are, not from where we are. Success will come from where people are. Moving on, after that particular experience, I continued, of course, to do that for some time. I suddenly realized the inanity of policy vis-a-vis what is happening on the ground. So the design of it is based on what we feel comfortable, what we know. So, for example, you would say that there should be a school development monitoring committee in which we have to have women panchayat members participate. Simple statement. Nothing. Just like you have parent-teacher meetings, you have to have this very simple statement. Now, just for a minute, just look at the powers given to that body. In terms of whatever funds are given, it has to ensure proper execution of it. That means they have a governance role. How will it happen for somebody who's a voluntary body to have governance insights? Should I build a toilet? Should I put lights? Should I paint a class? Should I buy books? What should my choices be? And is the principal to determine? Is this committee to determine? And is there a power struggle between the two? So there were simple issues where I realized that execution and policy were at loggerheads. Not because of bad intent of anybody, just the way they're designed. The person who designs it is a person like you or me. The person who has to implement it is living that life every day in a very different dynamic. Whereas in schools, for example, when my children were in school, I wasn't part of an STMC. In a private school, you're not. School decides. But a poor person is supposed to participate in the adjudication of money, in the way in which money is supposed to be spent. So these are the kinds of things that I really learned over the few years that I worked, let me say, as a trainer. I then went to work for International Labour Organization, which is a UN entity, where my lessons were completely different. Suddenly, I found myself in a position of power, but in a position of helplessness, because my job was to try and convince state governments to implement policies. So to help design and implement policies, and also to, I had to spend money. So I was, I had a set of money. Of course, there's a team. It's not that I did it alone, but there was a team, and the job was to ensure the expenditure happened. That means that you pay for certain things and things have to happen. And suddenly I found myself listening to state government, district government officials, and my previous lesson of people. Now the logic here was, I don't want money to be wasted. But I have a hierarchy. I have to do it within the, again, I'm going to use a Hindi word, daira. There it was Seema, I couldn't cross boundaries. Here, the boundary had been defined. I had to look at what those boundaries are. So both are boundaries, but both boundaries actually are at counterproductively working against each other. And it's not that anyone was bad or good, but the very design and execution was a problem, because design was done to ensure safeguard of the people who were giving the money. We clearly learned in the first part, at least I learned, that we were designing wrong. But I couldn't change the design here. The design here was stuck because of its own necessities. The people are stuck because of their own reasons. The sort of decade later, I sort of learned, the sort of first 5 years of my journey was largely with rural India, villages, and the way villages work with regard to work, men, women, labor. The second was with regard to systems, processes, policies, programs. And what I realized was, there is no good or bad person. There is only people in certain circumstance. So if you're in that circumstance, how do you behave? Was a big lesson for me. So, and then it's the last 13 years. The last 13 years, if I look at it, has been interesting, because I tried to put my learnings from the first phase, put people first and design around what they require, understand what policies are capable or not capable of doing, and negotiate with policies to see that they understand people, and devise a social enterprise model for it to get executed. That was the grand vision with which I started. But if I look back over the 13 years, I think I've had successes on areas I've understood better. For example, I understand mainstreaming very well. I understand how a policy will look at a small program and be able to scale it up. How do you position that? I understand well. But I've also understood that market is not necessarily the most logical entity either. It has its own moods, just like policy does, just like people do. So if you sort of humanize it, it is another human being. So we have three human beings in the room. We have human being one is the person and the community. Human being two is the state and its policies, and human being three is the market. So if we take three entities, all three entities, you have to learn them. You have to learn the nuances, you have to learn the moods, and then make it work with each other. So in my mind, the only way I can relate to all three is to humanize them. So my journey has been more about self-realization, more about understanding what I don't understand, and seeing whether I can quickly turn that around for more people to see what I have understood. Because I do believe that, like me, many people are trying to find answers. So I believe the more you share, the better it is, because someone else may find the same lesson and do a better job of innovating from that standpoint. So I think of it like a baton. Each one of us has to pass the baton to the other in order that they don't make the same mistakes that the previous person made, and see that they catch up in the race to solve the problem, which is really about wage and labor. See, if you take education and as an industry, I think it has completely everything that we know in education has been smashed, right? The sort of overarching theme of online has come. Is there a need for physical schools? Is there a need for physical colleges? Is there a way of delivery where a lot of learning can happen at your own pace and time? Smart classrooms have become a reality. Conference calls and whatever Zoom meets like we're doing have become this. For education, smart classrooms have completely transformed the way in which teaching has happened. For vocational education, I think that's been a very good thing, because vocational education has been always had a very stepmotherly treatment by society. Not by state, of course, but more by society, I would say. So suddenly now, I think the ability to look at vocational education differently, it's opened up an opportunity. How we use that opportunity over the next decade is up to us as human beings. And the reason I say this is, if education is not bound by the boundaries of a physical space, it opens up a lot for skilling. People can learn experientially, people can practice a lot of things outside. That means the skill and education can be married much better. Now here, there's an upside and a downside. The upside is that our education system was never considered good. We always criticized the way in which we learned. We said that education doesn't make us employable because it doesn't give us any skills, be it technical skills or the behavioral skills, communication skills, analytical skills. It didn't give us any of this. And this is not something I am saying, it's been how the report card for education has been in India. Now, assuming that is the case, it gives us a huge opportunity to then intervene and change that, because suddenly knowledge has become accessible to all. The downside of it is everybody is asking the question, is the divide between the poor and the rich going to be very sharp? Is the divide between rural and urban going to become very sharp? Because those who don't have access to devices, to internet, to the whole digital library that you require to function on an everyday basis to learn, you could just be out of it. Then who actually is moving into educational poverty, I think is a issue. So should we get people out of educational poverty, and if so, how? And I'm not even talking of learning, right? I'm talking of the tools. Just like you had a desk, a notepad, a book, a textbook, a teacher. How do you access these if you don't have access to digital devices, either the device itself or the internet itself or electricity? I think these are questions that plague the sector. If I look at the employment sector, there's a very different dynamics which has come in now. It is exploding with platforms which are saying that, you can come in at whatever point of time, come earn and get out. Now, this again is a great opportunity for the poor. The poor have always been outside the formal sector. 85% of our poor have been outside the formal sector. So if you leave agriculture, it is still 40-45%, which means half the population. So for this half the population, suddenly everybody is talking of gig workforce. Do we have social security there? Earlier also they were part of the gig workforce. You never called it gig, you called it outsourced. But fundamentally they weren't in a formal working relation, employer-employee relationship. So in my mind, the transition from learning to earning and from earning to learning, because you need lifelong learning, is something that is going to explode this decade. I don't know whether it is me as a woman leader or me as a leader. I want to distinguish the two. I didn't come from the sector. So I didn't come with a market. I didn't come from a corporate background. I didn't come from this. So I had a steep learning curve of what it means to run a business. Was my first. The second is, I think I as a, and I think this is more as a woman leader, I think I tend to be exceedingly critical of myself. And I think aloud. When I think of failures, I don't see a problem in sharing it. It comes naturally to me. And that's why I said, it may be because I'm a woman. I am more transparent with my emotions and feelings, and I've never wanted to adopt a masculine way of working. And I didn't come from the corporate sector, so it was easier for me to remain true to my, in a sense, feminine sense. I hate to use this masculine and feminine because I think it's a continuum, but I would say that's been a positive and negative. I think I have been able to I think I've been able to at least warn others that don't do what is wrong. That's a good thing, I think. On a flip side, I'm not sure how many people think I'm successful because of that. So, would you feel comfortable if someone says, listen, I've made a lot of mistakes and I'm likely to make a lot of mistakes? Would you want to invest in such a person, So I really am very grateful that we have very committed investors who backed my idea, who supported us. But I often think to myself, it must have been really tough for them. Because, everybody wants to hear a smooth sailing story. Whereas in my case, I'm not very sure that's the right thing to do. I do feel that, I should warn them, these are all things which can go wrong. So it's been a double-edged sword in that sense. I strongly feel that we need to have, well, it's arrogant to say it. I think we should have a feminine way of actually dealing with truths. And the market needs to learn our way. The brash, arrogant way which has been there, which is a more masculine trait, I don't think has worked, neither for society nor for anybody else.